Hi everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be creating a very quick and easy wedding card, and I'm starting out with the Floral Harmony embossing folder. Now when you buy this, there are 3 dies that come included, so you can cut out those big flowers in the center. I'm not going to be using the dies today. Instead, I'm going to be just embossing this on some watercolor paper and then adding some color to it in a little bit. So in order to get a really good embossed image, I'm liberally spraying my watercolor paper. This is some Fabriano Artistico Extra White cold press paper. I've sprayed that on both sides and then put it in the embossing folder and ran that through my die cutting machine. As you can see, it's very wet. A lot of water dripped off. But by using so much water on the paper, it really allows the paper to have a really deep impression without cracking, especially on watercolor paper. So it looks a little bit warped right now and very, very wet. So I'm actually going to set this aside to dry while I work on the other elements for my card. The other product I'm using today is this great stamp set called Happily a Lifetime, and it's a great stamp set for wedding cards, whether you are part of the happy couple getting married, or if you are a person attending the wedding or sending a gift. So I'm going to be stamping the Lifetime large greeting, as well as 2 smaller lines of text and the hearts. I'll eventually not use the hearts. I decide to not use them, but at this point in my creative process, I wasn't sure. I'm using some white cardstock. This is Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I've prepped that with an anti-static powder tool. My favorite is the COTTONTAIL from Rabbit Hole Designs. And then I'm stamping my stamp images in Versamark ink because Versamark is a very sticky ink. It's perfect for heat embossing because it stays sticky for a long time. Sprinkling on some gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. This is one of my favorite gold embossing powders. And after I have all of that sprinkled on over both small greetings, the large greeting, and the hearts, I tapped off the excess and then used my heat tool to melt the powder. As soon as you see that the powder is melted, you can move on. You don't need to keep heating it, and you get a nice, smooth, metallic look. Using the coordinating dies for the stamp set to cut out the large word and the hearts. And like I said before, I will eventually decide to not use the hearts, but I did decide to cut them out. I used the Simons Stamp T-square ruler and a craft knife from Tim Holtz to trim out the 2 little narrow greeting strips. I just cut the top and bottom of each and then used my scissors to cut off the sides. And then I applied some foam adhesive on the back of these greetings. I cut down some Scotch 3M foam tape into more narrow strips so that I could put them on the back of the greetings. And I just put foam on the back of each one of these enough that I could adhere it to my card. So back to that embossed piece. I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process because there was a lot of moisture in that watercolor paper. And then I'm going to add some gold watercolor paint on top just to really emphasize that embossed pattern. I'm using my die cut greeting to kind of figure out which gold shade in this fine tech palette would match best. And I decided this was the color. So I added a bunch of water to that pan, and then I really swirled my brush in that paint until it became nice and thick. I'm going to gently brush this over that embossed area. I want it to have a very uneven application because I want to emphasize the texture of the paper. And I also wanted it to look very organic and really show some of those dry brush strokes from my paint. And this is just going to really highlight all of those raised up areas on the floral design. I also used an acrylic block and I applied some of the paint and just used my brush to flick off that paint off the side. I just wanted some kind of water splatter or paint splatter around that area. I used my heat tool to speed along the drying process, and then I cut down this panel so that it was slightly smaller than an A2 card front. So the finished size on this was 3 3/4 tall by 5 inches wide. After I cut it down, I also took some of that paint and painted the edges of my panel. I made this very messy. I wanted it to be uneven because if you do it a little bit too even, it doesn't show as much. But if you kind of have some thicker, kind of smushed areas, it looks a little bit more organic. Once again, I used my heat tool to speed along the drying process. And then it was time to start assembling my card and pulling all of this together. I grabbed some more foam adhesive and applied that to the back of my watercolor panel. Foam adhesive is great for this because it's a little bit more forgiving if your panel is a little bit warped, and it allows you to really press things down and get everything flat. So in this case, I wouldn't recommend adhering it with like a tape runner or glue. Go ahead and use some foam adhesive. You're going to get a better impression. I then adhered my greeting pieces. I just held them with my tweezers so I could get them in the correct spots. And I put half of the small words on top and half on the bottom. So the finished entire greeting is wishing you a lifetime of love and happiness. I think that's the perfect greeting for a wedding card. Really, really great sentiment for that. So that finishes the card. Like I said, I decided not to use those hearts. I thought it was plenty beautiful just as is, and I love the sparkle and shine from that watercolor and the gold embossing. Everything I've used today on this wedding card is available at simonsaysstamp.com. Everything I've used is linked down in the video description, so you can click on over and do a little bit of shopping of your own. Thanks so much for watching today. I'll be back with another video very soon.